it used to be that this word sacramental was used for those other ceremonies that the church added to the administration of the sacrament. Well, let's go into the catechism. What is the definition the catechism gives of a sacramental? And it says, to give you the definition, sacramentals are holy things or actions of which the church makes use to obtain for us from God, through her intercession, spiritual favors. Now notice it says that is things or actions that the church uses give us grace, to help us obtain grace. God. Now, when we're speaking about the sacramentals, what are the sacramentals? Well, first of all, they would be blessings given by priests or bishops. When a priest gives his priestly blessing, all right, that's a sacramental. Another sacramental would be exorcisms. So there's basically two exorcisms. There's the very long form that's an actual exorcising, driving the devil out of a person that's possessed, and is quite a lengthy, maybe takes about 45 minutes. And then there's the shorter prayer that is for just driving the devil away, because he's around all of us, bothering us. But an exorcism is also a sacramental. And then the third category would be blessed objects of devotion. So that might be a scapular, a holy medal, a statue, a sacred picture, a crucifix, anything that is a sacred object can be blessed. Now, when we talk about blessings and blessing objects, there's two kinds of blessings that are given. Or we could say we could categorize things that are blessed into two categories. So there are things that are blessed with a constitutive blessing. Kind of a big word, but you'll understand. That the blessing constitutes them sacred things. So when a bishop blesses a chalice that a priest is going to use for Mass, that constitutes that chalice that's made out of metal and so forth, a sacred thing. Now that it's been blessed by the bishop, it's now a sacred thing. So you see, it's been constituted, it's been made to be a blessed thing, a sacred thing. Other blessings are called invocative. And an invocative blessing is one that calls down blessings upon the person that uses that object. For example, if you have your car blessed, in honor of St. Christopher, or your house is blessed, that does not constitute the car or the house a sacred thing. So you know that when a sacramental that's been blessed, a blessed object, is no longer usable, you have a scapular and it just wears out, it's no longer usable, you don't just throw it away because it's been blessed. It has been constituted a sacred thing. So you put that scapular in a container, and from time to time you would burn those blessed objects or bury them. We typically do both. We'll dig a pit, put our blessed objects in, burn it, and then cover it up, the ashes, with dirt. Because and there are also many in the current Roman ritual. This is the whole thing, the book. It's one of the liturgical books. This was put out under Pope Pius XII, so it's the most recent edition of the Roman ritual by a true pope. I also have one upstairs that was published under Pope Pius XI, whom I refer to here, but it's not necessarily going to have everything from Pius XII. Every word is other rituals or books that contain some of those and gives the English translation or parts of them in English. Weller, our priests use this, a lot of priests use it. It's the Roman ritual of the things. All right, I'm just going to read through. This is in the appendix. It's in the back. It's the index order. So, and I'm not going to read all of them. I'll just give you some example of things that can be blessed. Blessing of a sick adult, blessing of an ambulance, blessing of an apartment, blessing of an archive, an automobile, national banner, bees, blessing of bees, blessing of person, bread for the Feast of St. Blaise, Paschal blessing of bread, peas, cakes, cassock for a cleric, blessing of cattle, blessing of chalk at Epiphany, blessing of a child, blessing of sick children, blessing of a church organ, blessing of a cincture, feast of Our Lady or a saint, etc. Blessing of a corporal, things for Mass, blessing of crosses, stations of the cross, blessing of eggs, blessing of an electric dynamo, blessing of expectant mothers, and again, I'm skipping a lot of them, blessing of fields, blessing of fire, blessing of a fire engine, blessing of a fishing boat, blessing of community against floods, blessing of a baptismal font, blessing of fowl, blessing of any form of food, blessing of furnishings of divine worship, blessing of a habit of the Blessed Virgin Mary or in honor of a saint, blessing of the harvest, blessing of herbs, blessing of herds, blessing of homes, hospital, horses, infants, paschal lamb, lard, blessing of a lime kiln, blessing of linens, a blessing of a community against locusts, etc., etc., etc. Blessing of a mill, blessing of a new church, nuptial blessing, blessing of oats, blessing of an oil stock, blessing of sacred ornaments, blessing of an organ for the church, blessing of persons, blessing of a community against pests, blessing before departure for pilgrims, blessing of a printing press, blessing of a processional banner, mentioned that one, blessing of a railway and its cars, blessing of a wedding ring, blessing of a room, blessing of sacred vessels in general, blessing of sheep, a ship, a sick adult, silkworms, etc. I mean, it's amazing. There's a blessing of a well, all kinds of things in here. And in that regard, isn't it a shame that we're not as familiar with all these blessings as our forebears in ages gone by? And why is that? Well, there's several reasons for that. One is that, of course, we don't live in a Catholic country. And in Catholic countries, they not only would frequently go to the priests and ask for blessings for their crops and so on and so forth, but also they would refer to the days by the saint's name of that day. Matter of fact, one that comes to mind, you've probably all seen this on the movie that was made of a Shakespearean play, I think it's Henry V. And there's a famous speech that he gives in there, rousing the English troops before the battle on St. Crispin's Day. He says, you will tell your grandchildren, and they will wish they had been here on St. Crispin's Day. And he keeps calling it St. Crispin's Day. Well, how many of us would even know what day that is? I think, by the way, it's late October. I think it's right around the 25th or somewhere in late October. But the point is, they were impregnated with their Catholic faith. Their daily life was affected by it. Everything surrounded around, was surrounded by the faith, or the faith surrounded their whole life. So that's one reason, I believe, because we're not in a Catholic country. Another reason is because of the advances of modern medicine and science. Unfortunately, people don't think of God, of turning to God, of praying in a dire straits. But Catholics of ages would think of God and of the church for any need, and they didn't turn first to medicine or science. Again, we've tried to institute some of these blessings. We do the at Epiphany time, the blessing of gold, blessing of homes in the Paschal season, blessings that we'll have during or different events. So I want to go back and give you once again the definition of sacramentals, and then we'll go on and talk about some of the uses of the sacramentals and what are the effects. Okay, once again, sacramentals are holy things or actions of which the church makes use to obtain for us from God, through her intercession, spiritual and temporal favors. So that means the blessing you get by making use of a scapular or a rosary or a medal, you wear a medal. The blessings you obtain are a result of the blessing of the church in blessing that object, and second, your devotion in using it. Now, later on in this chapter, and I'll read it, it on a couple of occasions warns against superstition. So superstition would be the attitude of someone who has a blessed medal or object and puts that in a car and thinks, hangs it from the rear view mirror, thinks, oh, well, I'll never get in an accident. And it's not put there out of any necessarily devotion, but thinking that this is going to automatically protect me, no matter how carelessly I drive or anything else. That's kind of a superstitious attitude. So we have to guard against that. We have to be careful. Now, how, it says, do the sacramentals obtain favors from God? I just mentioned it. The sacramentals obtain favors from God through the prayers of the church offered for those who make use of them, and through the devotion they inspire in the person. So our dispositions, our devotion, and the blessing of the church. And you read the blessings of the church, like in the ritual, they're really beautiful prayers that a priest uses to bless objects. Now, that brings up an important point, and that is we should have the objects we use, holy objects, holy things, we should have them blessed. I remember a very interesting story in a book called, I think it's Satan in the Modern World. Has anybody read that? You're familiar with it? Okay, some religious are. So it has a story about different exorcisms, etc. And one of the things that I had not known until I read that book was that after Our Lady appeared at Lourdes in 1850, the church investigated them and declared those to be not authentic. It wasn't Our Lady. But one of the interesting these visions would not use rosaries that had been blessed. They wouldn't pray with a rosary that was blessed. They didn't want anything to do with it. It would be a diabolical. The Satan was trying, as it says in Scripture, he can disguise himself as an angel of light. So it's interesting. They didn't want to use rosaries that had been blessed. So it shows that the devil fears that, the blessing of the church on our sacramentals. Okay, now this is a very important question. What are the effects of using the sacramentals? What do we get from the use of them? And they're mentioned 5 things. Number 1, actual graces. Now, with the sacraments, remember I had the list up here, the sacraments is primarily an increase of sanctity. Without use, we get actual graces, which are important. Second, sins. Devout use of a sacramental can remit venial sins. Third, the remission of temporal punishment. So devoutly using them lessens our time in purgatory. Fourth, health of body and material blessings, if it's God's will. And finally, number 5, protection from evil spirits. So those are the effects or the results from devoutly using sacramentals. Now, what are the chief kinds of sacramentals? I put that up there. Blessings given by priests and bishops, exorcisms against evil spirits, and blessed objects. And the blessed objects, there's all kinds of them. There's so many different medals, etc. And one of the things we want to guard against in using sacramentals is avoiding extremes. One would be an attitude of a person that, well, I don't need them, and he doesn't want to wear a medal or a scapular or anything like that because, well, it's not essential or something like that, which kind of like a trying to think of the word for that kind of an attitude, not a good attitude. The opposite extreme would be someone who thinks that he or she is automatically protected by, the more sacramentals, the better. If you had somebody with many different medals hanging from his neck, or things like that, like an overuse of them. And that would be, it could be offensive to non-Catholics who think, this is strange, this is not really devout, it's just kind of odd. But also, it gets into that realm of what I mentioned about superstition. So let me find that in here. I want to read what it says here in this book about that. In the use of sacramentals, Catholics must avoid two extremes. On the one hand, they must not regard them as intended only for children or uneducated persons. They are for all the members of the church, and no one should consider himself so wise or so cultured. Wearing a medal or a scapular, be assured of the opportunity of conversion when death strikes. Such an attitude toward the sacramentals would be a form of superstition. So there can be different attitudes about them that we would find fault with. But remember, again, the devout use, and that is our devotion and the prayer of the church and them being blessed. So if you use sacramentals on a regular basis, it would be a good idea to have them blessed when there is blessing of articles. Okay, which are the blessed objects of devotion most used by Catholics? The blessed objects of devotion most used by Catholics are holy water, candles, ashes, palms, crucifixes, medals, rosaries, scapulars, and images of our Lord, our Blessed Mother, and the saints. Images, whether it be like a statue or a picture. Now notice it mentioned holy water. Holy water is a wonderful sacramental. It's good to, of course, have holy water fonts where we bless ourselves. We go in and out of the house, but to sprinkle the room. I remember when I used to go to my grandmother's house to stay, like on a Friday night or Saturday night, spend the night at her house. You'd hear the door open, and she would come in, and then you feel that drop of water you got in, because she would sprinkle everybody, before she went to bed, sprinkle her grandchildren. So using holy water. Now, of course, there are several kinds of holy water. There's the regular holy water, then there's Epiphany water that we bless on January 5th, and then there's Easter water that's blessed at the Easter Vigil. And so those are even a more powerful form of holy water because of the extended blessings involved in blessing them. There's another kind of water, but you would never use it. I've never used it, called Gregorian water, and that's specially blessed by a bishop when he's going to consecrate an altar in a church for the consecration of an altar. But the three main ones that I mentioned. Again, candles, palms, crucifixes, medals, rosaries, etc. How should we use sacramentals? We should make use of sacramentals with faith and devotion and never make them objects of superstition. Sacramentals become objects of superstition when they are considered good luck charms or when they are thought to produce effects apart from the prayers of the church and from the devotion they inspire. That they're just the very fact that it is a sacramental will produce effects regardless of the devotion of the person who uses it or the prayers of the church that bless it, that of itself it contains that power. Now, a couple of, what I would call the main sacramentals that we all use. All right. First of all, medals. There are two medals that are considered the most highly indulgenced medals. One is the miraculous medal, given by Our Lady to St. Catherine Labouré in 1830. And another one is the St. Benedict medal. And the St. Benedict medal is a very powerful sacramental. And it has all of these letters on it. Like on one side, there's a picture of St. Benedict. On the other side, it has CSPB, and then in between there's a cross, and that means Crux Sancti Patris Benedicti, the cross of our Holy Father Benedict. Right? And then on this one, it's I think think those are the letters. So, non Draco sit Nuki Dukes, may the devil not be my guide. Crux Sacra, the Holy Cross, may it be my light. And then it's got all these letters around here, and I'd have to, I'd have to see it to look at them. I memorized it once, but I could tell you what the words are for those letters, and it has to do with the devil, driving the devil away. May you, drink your own poison is part of it, etc. Beautiful word. So that's the St. Benedict medal. So the two medals that are probably better known, etc. And of course, there's a lot of medals of saints. Saint Michael is a special patron of policemen, so it's good for people in law enforcement to have a medal of Saint Michael. Saint Christopher for traveling, etc. And then there's scapulars. Now, of course, the main scapular would be the brown scapular, and we have the great scapular promise given to the Saint Simon Stock by Our Lady, and then we also have what's called the Sabbatine privilege. So two things connected with the wearing of the brown scapular. There's another one that's called the green scapular, but it isn't a scapular, even though it's called that. It's really a badge, kind of like the Sacred Heart badge. A so-called green scapular was given by Our Lady to a nun, and it has around the image of Our Lady the words, Immaculate Heart of Mary, pray for us now and at the hour of our death. And it's primarily for the purpose of obtaining conversions. So it's good to give to non-Catholics and either ask them to say that prayer, or if they don't say the prayer but they agree to keep it, then you say the prayer for them. So that's a scapular, although again, as I said, it's strictly speaking, it's not a scapular, because a scapular has two pieces of cloth, front and back, that's worn over the shoulders. And the scapulars come from the religious orders, because a Carmelite scapular, Our Lady gave that promise for those who would wear the scapular of the Carmelite order. And then later the church allowed small ones to be made that could be worn. But another one, or ones, would be what's called the five-way scapular. And that has 5 different ones sewn together, and there's a longer ceremony for those who wear the 5-way scapular. It has like the scapular of the Immaculate Conception, of the Holy Trinity, of the Our Mother of Sorrows, the Sacred Heart, or is it Precious Blood? I guess it's Precious Blood, the red one. So, and then of course Carmelite, brown scapular. So that's another one. Now, one type of sacramental that I like are the blessed cords. Now there are blessed cords of St. Joseph, and what you do is you wear it around your waist. So I wear always the St. Joseph cord and the St. Philomena cord. There's also one of St. Thomas Aquinas, and I think a couple of other ones. But the ones I'm familiar with, St. Joseph and St. Philomena. Interestingly, the St. Joseph cord is the only sacramental I'm aware of that, in blessing it, the priest uses incense. So it's a more elaborate blessing. Oftentimes we'll do that each year in March, on the Feast of St. Joseph. The seminarians make cords and then bless them. It's a beautiful blessing. But most things, the priest blesses it, says the prayer, and then sprinkles it with holy water. But that's one where you use incense in addition to the holy water. So those are some of the blessed objects. And of course then rosaries, blessing of rosaries. And I mentioned, I read from the book all of the other things. And there's so many different things that have a blessing attached to them. And if they don't, then there's something that could be used that would cover it. For instance, somebody asked me to bless salt for them, in their kitchen, wanted their blessed salt. Well, there's no specific blessing of salt. There is a blessing of salt that's part of the holy water, but that's the salt you put into the holy water. But there's a blessing of any food item. So you could use that for any food item. So there's a lot of blessings. They're beautiful. It's good for us to make use of them and realize that these are means of grace. And I want to end, because we're pretty much done with this topic. I want to read one more time the 5 effects or results from devoutly using the sacramentals. First, actual graces. Second, the forgiveness of venial sins. Third, the remission of temporal punishment. Fourth, health of body and material blessings. And fifth, protection from evil spirits. So, realizing that sacramentals are certainly wonderful, wonderful things that we should make use of. Now, as I mentioned, Chris, I don't think you were here, but before class, that next Thursday is going to be our last class for a period of time. So after next Thursday's class, we have really a couple more things in the catechism to go over. One is on prayer, one chapter on prayer, and then the following chapter is on the Our Father, going through the petitions, the 7 petitions of the Our Father. So I'll try and cover both of them next Thursday, and then we'll take a break until the spring, and then have some more classes on other topics.